All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. John Lynch went on KBR this morning. We'll review it coming up next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And they do run out. So get there early, get some brisket chili. Tell them Krug sent you. And this video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does is automatically entered into a drawing to win a free signed Ricky Pearsall jersey. We will announce the winner on Super Bowl Sunday night. After the game, we will announce the winner. So everybody who signs up is automatically entered to win a free Ricky Pearsall signed jersey, and we will announce the winner on Super Bowl night. All right, let's talk about John Lynch. He stopped by this morning on KBR, on the KBR morning show. It was Greg Silver and Derek Papa sitting in, Brian Murphy getting a little vacation, and they asked him, "Hey, John, how's your vacation gone?" And he said, "Hey, it's been a great Christmas. You know, the kids are home." He said him and his wife are empty nesters now, and they're just, so it's great to have the kids back in the house, and I understand how that feels. And he said he's looking forward to, a great 2025, and that's kind of where the conversation started. And then they asked him, how would you evaluate your rookie class this year? And he's like, he said the theme of this rookie class was the character of the guys was really, really good. And there's no question, they got a high character group of guys. And when we're talking about character, we're also talking about football character. Guys who like to play, guys who enjoy playing, guys who want to play football. They love the process of pro football. It's not just game day. It's about, do you love the process of playing pro football? And a lot of these guys do. He said that, many of them helped right away. Obviously, Dom Pooney was a plug-and-play starter. John mentioned the Ricky Pearsall shooting, and, once again, maintained that Ricky Pearsall is going to be a really good football player. I don't doubt it, but you know what? We haven't seen it yet. Let's just say that. He's made a couple of plays, but he's he's run a lot of routes, and he really hasn't made that many plays. I mean, he hasn't made that many catches. He doesn't have a lot of production. Nice guy. There's some quickness there. There's some smoothness there. There's some ball skills there. There's some stop and start quickness there. But as far as actual production, he's given us glimpses. I think there's a chance that when Ricky Pearsall and Brock Purdy are in full, mode together where they're on the same page, I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be one of those guys that could be really, really, really hard to stop on 3rd and 6, because I think if Brock can throw with anticipation and they can work on their timing, and they can do some incredible things on the football field. So the potential is there. But I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. He doesn't separate. He doesn't have a huge catch radius. He just doesn't look super special for a guy who was drafted in the first round. So obviously him being shot has made a huge impact on his year. So to some degree you have to take that into account. But, it's an incredible story of perseverance. Now the question is, can he play well enough as an NFL receiver to be a difference maker or a starter or a major impact guy for the Niners? John talked about Dom Pooney and that he's been playing at a really high level. And as far as how does he wind up finishing out the year? We'll have to see. Is he kind of running out of gas a little bit? But he's definitely played at a high level this year. Malik Mustafa, he described Malik Mustafa as a force. And there's no question Mustafa is a force. He says Jacob Cowing is coming on. He says Isaac Guerrero has been coming on. He's excited about Tatum Bethune jumping back into the lineup and giving the 49ers a little impact at inside linebacker. And then he even mentioned Evan Anderson, the rookie defensive tackle, who's been really, really good. I think Evan Anderson, if you were grading these guys, Renardo Green has had the best year. There's no question. Green's been fantastic. Him and Pooney, I would say. Purdy has made the biggest impact right away, but Green has played at a really, really high level on the corner. I would say those two guys are 1 and 1A as far as the best picks. Then quickly you'd go to Mustafa, who's just a real difference maker, and I think then maybe Garendo. But then Evan Anderson's probably next. I mean, he is just such a force inside. The motor runs hot. He's not in the kind of physical condition that eventually he will be in. And yet, year one in this defense, and he looks good. He makes plays against the run. He comes off of blocks to make play against the run. He's got a little bit more pass rush. He definitely moves his feet. In a lot of ways, Evan Anderson looks an awful lot like a young DJ Jones. He's got functional strength, and he's a great kid. And the motor runs hot. And he's got better quickness than you think, and he's strong as an ox. And there's just a lot to like there. So, and John mentioned, hey, man, it's a young man's league. And the one thing I think this last draft should tell the 49ers, this is the way to do it. This is the way you're going to build back up through the draft. You're not going to go make a ton of trades. You're not going to go make a ton of free agent signings. You're going to sign a couple of free agents here or there that help you, no doubt. A handful of guys, half dozen at most. Probably the best way to do it is the way Green Bay did it. Brian Gutekunst, who went for, Josh Jacobs on offense, Xavier McKinney on defense. He added 2 free agents. They were both impact guys, and it's helped the pack immeasurably. I think that approach to building in free agency is probably the right approach. Find a couple impact guys or find a couple, 3 or 4 guys that you think are perfect fits for what you do. Don't spend big money, and for the most part, build through the draft. And as John said this morning on the KBR Morning Show, it is a young man's league, and there's no question about that. I'd love to see the 49ers trade back from 10 or 12 or wherever they're going to be into the mid-20s and make this a volume draft. If you could get 15 or 16 or 17 players out of this draft and maybe give yourself 5 or 6 extra picks in the 2026 draft, I think that would be the path I would go. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to the draft. It's funny. John mentioned that he doesn't like the conversation. He understands why the questions are asked, but he doesn't like the conversations of, what's your guys' motivation to finish your season? He's like, yeah, that's what we do. We're football players. We play football. And that's how Shanahan feels about it as well. I mean, don't think about it. You signed up to play a full season. There are guys that never play in the playoffs. It's not your birthright to play in the postseason. I mean, I think that was the message. And you got to play the full season. So you're playing hard, whether you're in it or out of it. There's always motivation. You want to put good film out there. You want to improve as a football team. Individually, you want to improve as an individual. You want to improve as a unit. You want to improve as a defense. You want to improve as an offense. You want to improve as a team. You want to set the groundwork for next year. I mean, there are things that can be achieved late in the year. The question is, do you want to risk playing Brock Purdy behind a makeshift offensive line? That is the real question. And I wouldn't, but they're going to. So we'll see if they get away with it. He said, he basically said that, they know why they failed this year and we plan on fixing it. He's like, we know what we need to do in this offseason to build ourselves back, and we plan on doing what we need to do. He didn't get into specifics, but he said we plan on fixing it. We are going to fix it. We'll see. I mean, the bottom line is the Niners have done well with the picks they've made for the most part on day 3. They just have missed a lot in the first couple rounds. If they start hitting in the first couple rounds of the draft, they're going to do very, very well because they're scouts, or maybe they ought to, whoever's making the day 3 picks, maybe they ought to listen to those guys a little bit more because their day 3 success ratio is far higher than their day 1 or day 2 success ratio as far as hit and miss on the draft. And that really flies in the face of the way it should be and the way it is for most teams. So the 49ers need to continue to do well on day 3, but they need to start doing well on day 1 and day 2. And that is not going to be like, they won't go back to the Super Bowl and win it. They won't do it. They won't climb to the top of the NFL mountain without dominating in the draft. So that to me is absolutely where it has to get done. He was asked about, Ben Johnson's offense, and he's like, hey man, they're a high-powered offense. And He mentioned how that Brad Holmes, the general manager, and Dan Campbell, the head coach, had some vision when they traded for Jared Goff. McVay wanted Goff out of town. He wanted Stafford, and those guys were smart enough to understand that Goff had value, and they picked him off, and look what he's done. They've surrounded him with a great offensive line, terrific weapons, and now, as John says, they have it all. They got maybe the best offensive line. They got tremendous speed throughout their roster, big playability on both sides of the ball. They're big time. It's a big time football team. John was asked what happened this year. Why did you guys backslide as much? And he's like, we didn't finish. He's like, we haven't finished. It's funny because they came into last year's offseason saying we need finishers. And then they got into a season this year in the division. They just didn't finish against the Cardinals, and they didn't finish against the Seahawks, and they didn't finish against the Rams. And guess why you don't finish? Because you're not deep enough. The 49ers were a top-heavy team with some of the NFL's best players, but then behind those players was nothing. George Kittle's an awesome tight end, but guess what? The Packers have Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. It's really nice to have Brandon Ayuk, big wide receiver, but guess what? The Packers have Dobbs and, Wicks and Reed and Watson, and they have greater depth. So that's really what it's about. It's, they couldn't finish because they didn't have good enough depth. 49ers started fast, but they would peter out. They just didn't have enough depth or enough depth of talent to be good at the end of games. And so they died in the fourth quarter. Simple as that. They're not deep enough. Their misses in the first 3 rounds of the draft have come home to roost. And he mentioned that, the defense is third overall as far as yards, but situational football matters. Third down, they're not good. Red zone, they're not good. Turnovers recently, they have not been good. They didn't finish games inside the division. As I said, they had Arizona, LA, and Seattle down. They lost all 3 of those games. If they won those 3 games, they'd be going to the playoffs. Instead, they lost those games, and they're going home. They also asked him a little bit about Ricky Henderson, and he just talked a little bit about how Ricky's such a special player and what a special player Ricky, has been throughout his career. And that, it was great to hear John Lynch talk a little bit about the great Ricky Henderson. But there you go. That was John Lynch earlier this morning. They kept it tight because it was, no Murph, and it was Greg and Derek sitting in for Murph and Marcus. But John Lynch, a little bit of John Lynch. And I thought probably the biggest thing more than anything was like, hey, we know why we failed, and we know what we need to do to build it up. And I wish there had been a follow-up with that to, okay, what do you need to build it back up? You think you just stated you know what you need. What do you need? And I would have followed that one up with, if you're going to say here on a 50,000 watt radio station that you've got the answers, share them with us. Share them with us. If you've got the answers and you know what you need to do, clue us in. Give us a hint. Tease something that you think is a philosophy. For me, and I talked about this on a live stream recently, and I've already started my plan to rebuild the 49ers for next year. And I won't give you my full plan, but part of it is to trade back from 10 or 11 or 12, wherever they wind up, into the mid-20s or mid-30s, and accumulate more draft capital for 2025 and additional draft picks for 2026. That's number one. Number two, Brock Purdy's my guy at quarterback. I'm not going away from Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's my guy, and I'm going to extend him, and I'm hopefully going to extend him at a reasonable figure. But I'm also going to tell him that I am going to have another quarterback on the roster that will challenge Brock Purdy, because I think Brock Purdy needs to be challenged to get the best out of Brock. There has to be somebody sitting right there. Last year, he had Sam Darnold sitting right there. If he didn't play well, they could go to Sam Darnold. This year, they didn't have that player. And so whether it's Mac Jones, Drew Lock, Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones, there's going to be another NFL quarterback sitting there ready to play. I think that's an imperative. My quarterback room next year would be Purdy, Mordecai, a veteran quarterback, and maybe a day 3 rookie on the practice squad. And then my third thing is the Niners, you can't get to the low red zone and not be able to run. I mean, that's a central part of the problem this year. They can't run inside the 5. Second and goal from the 4 and you're passing. Third and goal from the 4, you're passing. Fourth and goal from the 4 and you're kicking a field goal. Where was the running play? Where's the powerful run play? So to me, it's either they're not powerful enough on the offensive line at the center spot, and I think that's the case. And I also don't think they've got a power back that can really power it in from the 5. And I don't think they have a power fullback that can really uproot people out of the hole. So that's what I'm doing. I'm starting right there. I want a center with some power and some force. I want a big-time center prospect in this draft. I want a big-time fullback. I like J.J. Pegues, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, as a fullback. And I'm calling up Doug Hendrickson, and I'm at least finding out what it's going to take to get Najee Harris to come home. Because to me, Najee would be the kind of back that the Niners need inside the 5. And maybe it's time to use a guy like J.P. Mason, who's a restricted free agent, as another way to build, maybe a trade asset that could get you a pick or two, and then turn around and go give some money to Najee and add him to your mix. Now at least you got somebody with some power and some force who can run it inside the 5. Right now, Kyle Shanahan is coaching around a bad offensive line, and you just can't coach that way. You can't play call that way, and that's what he's doing. He understands the weaknesses of his football team better than anybody, and he's trying to coach around those weaknesses. Kyle, the personnel man, has to do a better job for Kyle, the head coach, and that's where it starts right there. So that would be 3 of my steps to rebuild the Niners. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krueger Show. Thanks to Better for sponsoring the video. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krueger Show on YouTube.